Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episode of the Square Circle Podcast with your host, Marie Shadows. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the New Japan Cup of March 12, 2025, and this only had 2 matches. So before we jump right into the matches, as always, make sure to share this podcast episode if you are enjoying this. Tweet it out, share it with a friend, let them also hear about a wrestling podcast that goes into deep thoughts and just thinking out loud about professional wrestling. As always, please make sure to check the description boxes for all links pertaining to supporting the Square Circle podcast. In the last episode, I was explaining how I have now felt that the Square Circle podcast is a big passion project for me with different shows. So the Square Circle podcast consists of review shows such as New Japan Pro Wrestling, MOW, maybe a little bit of AEW if I have to talk about like industry standards or just something of that nature, some WWE content, and some other things that I want to talk about, some interviews. The Square Circle podcast has it all. The Square Circle podcast will be free no matter what. Anything that needs to be behind a paywall will be something like reactions to Legends and Future Greats to get my 2 cents, reactions to certain tape study series, reactions to anything, something that will be behind a paywall. Those take a little bit longer to do. If I need to do some interviews that are top notch, that will be behind a paywall. Who knows? It depends. It really depends. If it takes me a long time to do, it goes behind a paywall. For podcast episodes, I like conversation. I like engagement. So if you have any comments, any kind of thoughts, drop them, whether you're listening to this on youtube.com/Square Circle Podcasts. Drop some comments over on Spotify. If you guys didn't know, fans and viewers and listeners alike, Spotify has now given you guys the tools to interact with your favorite podcast hosts on Spotify for podcasters. They have given you guys the ability to leave comments and also to vote in the polls if we decide to put up polls for the podcast episodes. So please go ahead and take a moment to leave a comment on Spotify, leave a comment on YouTube, and you could also leave a comment on the free wrestling newsletter that I have called the Square Circle Podcast Hub over at marieshadows.substack.com. Now, with all of that being said, I do have a website called Fourth Wall. Fourth Wall is very similar to Patreon. It's an alternative to Patreon and is one of my favorite websites to use because not only can you get memberships there, but you can support me there by buying the merchandise and also interacting with the posts that I have there. There is a thing called Tape Study Roadmap, which is for professional wrestlers. Professional wrestlers, if you are out there and you want a different take and outside the box feedback, suggestions on your matches and or promos, I'm your girl. I am hosting one-on-one consultations. There are 2 different ways to get those consultations. There is one where you could become a member for $16 a month and I'll be your forever cheerleader until you decide to end that. There is no commitments. The moment that you get a membership off of Fourth Wall, you do get a comp to a 3 to 12 months, depending on what membership you get. But if you are a wrestler, you automatically get the 1-year comp for the Square Circle podcast on Substack. So marieshadows.substack.com, you'll get a compensation for that, as well as any other fan out there that's listening that wants to support me through memberships. You can also get a 3 to 12 month comp on marieshadows.substack.com, just in case if I put anything extra on the newsletter, because I can do a lot more versatile kind of content on the newsletter itself with pictures and videos and audio, all of that multimedia stuff. I could do that on the newsletter. So that's an option. Now back to wrestlers. The tape study roadmap gets you either a monthly commitment of $16 a month for me to be your forever cheerleader, or a one-time payment just to test out the feedback that I could give you for your match and or promos at $31, just a one-time thing, a one-on-one consultation. Other people are doing it within the IWC as well. And I just want to lend my voice and lend my knowledge to you guys. Also on Fourth Wall, if you go to the About Me section, it lays out exactly who I am, what I did for WWE, the seminars that I went to, and the commentary gigs, the interviews, and what I've done on the wrestling indies and the business as a whole. And I hope that you guys join me on that journey. If you want any type of help, I'm here to help you. It's a way for me to give back to something that I really, 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 really love. Really love, really passionate about. And yes, eventually the tape study sessions will be coming back. Let's try for Tuesday. Nothing set in stone, but if you really want to follow me at Marie_Shadows, and also Discord. Check out all the links down in the description box to know where to support me and where I will have that information there. But yeah, I do want to bring back the tape study sessions so we can watch wrestling, talk about wrestling, and you get to see firsthand what I do for tape study by breaking down professional wrestling matches, similar to what Stevie Richards does on his channel. Now, with that being said, thank you so much for listening to that whole entire pitch. Again, all those links down in the description below. I appreciate every single one of you guys listening to the Square Circle podcast. Without you guys, I would not be here. Thank you for listening to this around the world, and I hope to see you guys one day in chat when I go live, and I hope to see that you guys grab a membership and or merchandise to support the Square Circle podcast that is independently owned, independently created, and independently we create wrestling content here, and I hope it gives you a lot of value. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's hop into the review for the New Japan Cup of March 12th, 2025. The first match is Taichi versus Gabe Kidd. Now, we need to talk about something very quickly before we jump into the match and how I felt about it. I know that this business does not guarantee tomorrow. And I know that money is also not guaranteed tomorrow. And I know that wrestlers are allowed to go wherever they want and they follow the money. And that is what is important, because we made money important, and money is what's needed to survive on a daily basis. Now, the only reason why I bring this up is because I am not buying what Gabe Kidd is doing at this very moment, because the immersion of his character, the immersion of him being the guy that is very similar to Stone Cold, Steve Austin, by doing what he wants to do, going to the beat of his own drum, rather than just taking a payday for the sake of taking a payday. But again, I understand that money is necessary. I understand that. However, for a guy that was cursing out AEW and Tony Khan, like most of us are doing, because we can see the disparage that happens between New Japan Pro Wrestling and happens between AEW, and who's more bigger and who's more pettier. We were all behind him because at least our voices can be amplified by his voice. But then after losing to Kenny Omega and going on AEW as a consolation prize, even though he's been on AEW Collision and Ring of Honor, I believe, before, it was okay because it wasn't loud at that time. But losing to Kenny Omega made it that much louder for him to go to AEW and start yelling and bringing his character, which I believe just got watered down when he went to AEW. Because how do you go to AEW, try to start some shit, talk your shit, and just have random matches with random people? And I know somebody's going to say his match with Mark Briscoe is not random. The matches that he had wasn't really random. There's some history there. I get it. But you also have to think in the mindset of a casual fan that is changing the channels on cable, because AEW is still on cable. Not everybody has a max subscription. And even if they do have a max subscription, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be watching professional wrestling. They're going to be watching the other programming on the streaming services, because that is what they like to do. Not everybody is a wrestling fan that has a Max subscription and or Netflix subscription. Sometimes people throw on their subscription networks as background noise, and most of the time is not even about professional wrestling. We live in this bubble where we think that everybody in our bubble, and maybe even beyond our bubble, All they do is watch wrestling 24/7, and you guys got to stop that. That's why sometimes having these echo chambers and these bubble chambers are just the worst, because the same things get said, they get regurgitated, and everybody says the same thing, everybody thinks the same way, and we can't have that. Just keep in mind that whoever has a subscription service to Max and or Netflix, they're not always going to be watching professional wrestling on there. Now, to say all of that, the point I'm trying to make is that a casual fan that is flipping through the channels on their cable box may not know who Gabe Kidd is. Probably doesn't know who Gabe Kidd is. Let me clarify that. And probably doesn't know who Mark Briscoe is either. So to have Gabe Kidd be the Gabe Kidd that we've seen on New Japan Pro Wrestling, that has done a phenomenal job in his character work on New Japan, to have it watered down on AEW where it's just he's yelling at him and they all of a sudden going to have a match because he interrupted his interview time. Everybody at AEW, when they get their interview time interrupted, it automatically goes into a match, and that's not story. Okay? So I just didn't like that you can see that Gabe Kidd is taking the payday, and that eventually, who knows? I don't even know. But word on the Twitter streets is that maybe he goes to AEW. Do I want that? No, I don't, because he's going to get lost in the shuffle. He's going to be so watered down that like it's not even going to be funny. He's going to be facing people that most people will not care about, most people that don't draw, most people that don't get the crowd excited unless there's some type of a spot that could cause potential paralysis and no longer here, because AEW doesn't take precautions, even though the stupid mindset of that wrestlers know what they're getting themselves into. Wrestlers know the risk. It does not matter if a wrestler knows the risk. If you are able to save them from themselves, because as human beings, sometimes our brain just disconnects to everything else and it's like, go, 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 go. And if something happens, you can't get that person back. Whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, you can't let people do what they do. You can control what they do for the safety of themselves. Like that phrase, you got to save them from themselves. Sometimes wrestlers need to be saved from themselves. So we got to get that mindset out of that. Wrestlers know the risk. Like, I don't know why you guys care. They know the risk. We care because of the information that we now know through the years of guys sacrificing themselves, their bodies, their mentalities. Okay? So, with that being said, Gabe Kidd, as much as I like him, I cannot get back into his character, because when he came back to New Japan Pro Wrestling after spending 2 days or whatever it was in AEW before the New Japan Cup tournament started, when he came back and cut that promo in the ring where his words, not my words, his words, he said, fuck AEW, fuck WWE, he is New Japan Pro Wrestling. That kind of promo, right? I can't get back into your character, dude, because you spent 2 days over at AEW, you were yelling at people, you had random matches, and you still want to say fuck AEW, but you took the money bag anyway. How does that look? That looks very, very bad. If you didn't take the money, then, you know, maybe there'll be like some, yeah, I could get behind you still. But now I'm just like, I don't know, man. I was hoping that at least one wrestler will stand on their convictions and be like, this is the flag that I'm planting within the ground, and this is where I'm going to be holding everything until things get right, until things get fixed. Because it is really unfair that AEW has this hold over New Japan Pro Wrestling for what it looks like on the outside. And you were the voice of everyone here that's trying to be like, this partnership is not making sense. And then to go over, have matches, be a wrestler, take the money. I get it. But it's the principle that I'm calling out. Now, even as I say all of this, if I do ever get the chance to interview Gabe Kidd, it's going to be a very weird interview, maybe an awkward interview, but these are just my opinions, my thoughts, my observations on what we've seen in the past weeks, months. So I'm calling it out to talk about it as a talking point, but it really would be an interesting conversation to have with him just because of principle, dude. Principle. And I hope that for everyone that is listening, I hope that you guys understand where I'm coming from with my observations and the things that I say. Now, let's jump into this first match of Taichi versus Gabe Kidd. We had an exchange that opens up the match. I am starting to notice that whenever we get into Gabe Kidd's matches, it always has to be some type of exchange and some type of yelling and some type of, I'm going to be stronger than you. Let's do shoulder tackles and forearms. And it's like, you don't have to do it every time now for the matches because now it's going to become a very safe, familiar formula where it's like, please stop doing that. Those type of exchanges need to be somewhere in the middle of the matches where you're building this roller coaster of emotions and finally you get to that one spot where you can do the exchanges and be like, look how tough I am, and I didn't go down with that shoulder tackle that you decided to shoulder tackle me with. You know, we don't need the match to open up with an exchange like that. We get a big boot by Taichi, but Gabe returns with a lariat. We get a slam to Taichi, back first into the padding, some more slams, a Boston Crab to Taichi, but then we get a rope break, a Russian leg sweep to Gabe Kidd, the mule kick under Gabe's arm. That is one of Taichi's specialties right there. Gabe kicks out when we get the pin attempt. We get an exchange of kicks, some headbutts, the dragon sleeper on Gabe. Taichi releases the hold. Taichi ends up punching Gabe. Gabe comes back and does a power driver to Taichi. And then as we get further into the match, of course, we got to get some shenanigans in by House of Torture. If you guys don't know, there has been an ongoing feud between Ren Narita versus Gabe Kidd. So Ren Narita comes out, pulls out Red Shoes Uno so Red Shoes can stop the count. And there is a little fight that goes on between Ren Narita and Gabe Kidd. They fight on the outside. We have that House of Torture interference. Gabe ends up slapping everybody, and Ren comes in with the push-up bar to knock out Gabe Kidd, and he knocked them out to the point where Red Shoes Uno had awakened and started counting. And again, we have another match that ended in a countout. Taichi ended up winning due to countout and due to the interference from Ren Narita by knocking out Gabe Kidd with the push-up bar that everybody uses to do their push-ups in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And so again, both people were saved, and it saves face where nobody takes a pin, nobody taps out. And I thought that that was really silly to do, to have a count out for this match, because I wasn't expecting a count out to happen between a Gabe Kidd match versus like Taichi. Like I wouldn't have expected a count out. Most of Gabe's Kidd matches end in like 1, 2, 3 a pin because Gabe over here is beating the shit out of them. But the numbers game happened. We have a count out. Taichi is our winner, and he goes on in the New Japan Cup. Now, match number 2, which is Shota Umino versus the Great Okan. This is the first time in a couple of weeks, I believe, or in a couple of days, that we see Shota Umino. And Shota Umino comes out with the same theme song, and he has Death Riders in his Titantron, and he has the Poppy theme song still. But he comes out in all white. His pants is all white. His shoes all white. He is wearing a hoodie that is all white. And the hood is up over his head, shielding his face. And he just walks to the ring, walk down that aisle, get into the ring before he reveals to us that he has completely shaven his head and he is a new Shota Umino. However, just because he shaves his head doesn't mean that he is a new Shota Umino. But I will say that this slow burn of him possibly turning heel or having a psychotic break is going to make Shota Umino a star in the upcoming months. I wish it would be maybe a little sooner, but if we rush it, it's going to be really, really bad. In the previous podcast episodes, I've explained that Shota Umino should be going after Jon Moxley at this very moment. He should not have been in the New Japan Cup. To be honest, during Wrestle Dynasty, because he won against Claudio Castagnoli, a soldier of the Death Riders, because Jon Moxley was too busy and didn't care about his quote unquote pupil, because during the G1 so many years ago, before he went to AEW, before AEW was ever created, Jon Moxley was in New Japan Pro Wrestling, was in the G1, and decided to take a young lion named Shota Umino under his wing, which, by the way, to me, Jon Moxley is not a mentor at all, but decided to take Shota Umino under his wing and try to mold him into something. And now Shota Umino has this identity crisis. And he also has the identity crisis to be like a Tanahashi, to be a babyface. Now he's stuck between the two worlds of babyface and heel, and he's in the middle. He doesn't know how to navigate this. He thought he knew how to navigate it. And every time that I were to talk about a Shota Umino match, I would explain the crowd reaction, because when he was full Shota Umino with the hair and the bright colors, he came out, everybody cheered for him. And when I say everybody, I mean women and children, some of the men. And then lately, before he shaved his head, it was women and children cheered him when he came out. And then if he decided to interrupt somebody that the fans liked, he got booed. If he were to do something in the ring that the fans didn't like against the one wrestler that they did like, he would get booed. So it was sort of like there was this weird thing going on with Shota Umino that is very interesting to talk about, that is very interesting to figure out. And some of my fans have told me that it's very similar to Naito, that fans didn't know how to take to Naito in the beginning, but now Naito is such a fan favorite, and Shota Umino could be going down the same path as Naito. And that could be the thing. However, I will go back and say that Shota Umino needs to be in AEW at this very moment. He did not need to be in the New Japan Cup. So, after he defeats Claudio Castagnoli, that should have given him a one-way ticket to AEW and have a little bit of an excursion over in AEW and go after Jon Moxley and fight Jon Moxley. So that way he can rid his mentor out of his mind, out of his character, regardless of him no longer carrying the jacket like he used to represent that this was because of his mentor. But he needs to defeat that side of him that is basically still attached to Jon Moxley. Like, he got upset when Jon Moxley was like, oh no, I'll send somebody else. Like, how dare you, sir? Your supposed student is calling you out, and you're going to go and send one of your minions to go defeat him, and then nothing happens? There's no continuation of that story. Now, I'm not saying that Shota is not worthy of being in the New Japan Cup. Anybody is worthy of being in the New Japan Cup, but Shota has other business to attend to, and that business should be taken care of by going to AEW, defeating Jon Moxley, and start his process. And when I say his, I mean Shota's process of becoming who is Shota Umino, rather than trying to be a Jon Moxley sort of not badass, but can beat the shit out of you, because it looks like Shota could definitely beat the shit out of people, and a baby face like Tana and still be loved, you know? Like, Shota needs to go on this journey of trying to find who he is. And I've noticed that his matches are very good. Even though I praise his matches all the time, it's just that his character work, I'm like, bro, you need to do something. But his matches I have seen in this tournament have leveled up and elevated, and it has become very smart in the way that he goes after the wrestlers in his matches. So with the Great Okan has this chip on his shoulder. He's very, very arrogant. He's part of the United Empire, and the Great Okan is great as a wrestler. I love talking about the Great Okan matches. However, in this match, I believe he bargained more than he can chew, even though I know that's not the phrase, but just stay with me. He bit off a lot more than he can chew. so to speak, because he always sort of like not bullied, but teased. Teased is the right word. He always teased Shota. So I believe that this match was a way for Shota to get back at the Great Okan. So like I said, Shota wears all white. I don't know what that could mean, but sometimes wearing white is very symbolic. It could mean different things to different people and to different wrestlers and stuff like that. When you wear white, it's supposed to represent starting new, starting fresh. Sometimes in the springtime, you can wear white to symbolize that kind of stuff, but it could be very different for what Shota wants it to mean. But because he shaved his head, because he came out in all white, it's supposed to be a new version of Shota. And I can definitely say that his in-ring ability, there's stuff that he does now that I'm like, oh, that's so smooth. That's so good. We get a drop kick to the Great Okan from Shota. We get some double underhook throws as well. We also get some drop kicks. We get a shoulder breaker to Shota. That's from the Great Okan. The Great Okan is also no pushover and no slack as well, even though he is a little pudgy, but it's totally okay. But the Great Okan does end up matching Shota for this one. However, as we continue to go on, Shota Umino brings out a brand new finisher called Second Chapter, which I am very interested to find out more about why he called it Second Chapter. And all it is, it's like a delayed fisherman suplex. That's all it is. It's nothing fancy, and sometimes these simple moves can be devastating finishers. I just think that if he's going to call something the Second Chapter, it should look devastating because it definitely doesn't really do much damage. But that is just me. So, because Shota Umino did his new finisher, the Second Chapter, on the Great Okan, he goes for the cover. 1, 2, 3. Shota Umino advances in the New Japan Cup. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is the wrap-up for the review of the New Japan Cup of March 12, 2025. As a reminder, Taichi won against Gabe Kidd, so therefore he is the winner. He won via countout, so he moves on to the next round, and Shota Umino defeated the Great Okan of the United Empire, and Shota Umino wins by pin and advances to the next round. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out. Always leave your thoughts. I encourage you guys to leave comments and thoughts and challenge me on some stuff. Just be very respectful if you're going to challenge me on anything that I say, whether it's on the podcast episodes or even on the live streams at youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast and anywhere else I decide to live stream. Just be respectful with it. That's all I ask for it. So again, leave a comment, share it out. If you guys are on youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, that like button, share it out, leave a comment, do all that YouTube stuff. It helps out the video. It brings it into the algorithm. We can have more like-minded wrestling individuals to have a conversation with. If you are over on the Spotify side of things, you could also leave a comment. You could also leave emojis as well if you want to. You could share it out. And this episode will be on all podcasting platforms. If you prefer the wrestling newsletter, which is at Substack, marieshadows.substack.com, which is a free wrestling newsletter. You could also leave a comment there and also join the Substack chat, where it is a private wrestling group chat that you have access to. And if you want to take it a step further, if you are a wrestler looking for feedback, out of the box thinking, any kind of help on your matches and or promos, think of it like how Stevie Richards does his breakdowns. I also do breakdowns called Tape Study Chatter, which is now, in addition to, I should say, Tape Study Roadmap for all wrestlers. Again, check out the Fourth Wall link where you can end up getting a membership and or a one-off payment time drop off kind of deal. If you want me to take a look at your matches, give you feedback and give you some inspiration, motivation, whatever you want, we could talk about it. One-on-one consultations. I will find a better way of how to pitch this to people, but I am just putting myself out there. I'm letting you know that I am available to chat about character work, promo work, how to layer all of your lores and stuff, and any type of social media ideas that you have, and we could put it into motion and stuff like that. But again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Square Circle Podcast. Thank you for clicking on all of the links. Make sure to check all of the description boxes for the links to support the Square Circle Podcast everywhere and anywhere. This is my passion project, and I love professional wrestling. I love New Japan Pro Wrestling, and thank you for having a conversation with me about New Japan and New Japan Cup. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you guys on the next one.